I'd like to welcome our opening speaker, Mr. Ron Kelusky. Ron Kelusky is the Ontario Chief Prevention Officer, the CPO. We call him the CPO. The CPO oversees the prevention office within the Ministry of Labour and has a wide range of responsibilities, including working with Ontario's health and safety system partners to prevent workplace injuries, illnesses, and fatalities. Reporting to the Minister of Labour on the performance of the Ontario Occupational Health and Safety System through an annual report, setting province-wide training and safety program standards, the establishment and implementation of a new provincial occupational health and safety strategy. Prior to his appointment as CPO, Ron was the President and CEO of Public Services Health and Safety Association, a health and safety association of the Ministry of Labour. Before joining PSHSA, Ron held senior positions within the private and not-for-profit sectors in the municipal government. Ron holds a master's degree in administration, an MBA, and is a certified municipal manager, and is a member of the Institute of Corporate Directors and Canadian Society of Safety Engineers. More than anything else, Ron is, in my mind, probably the most appropriate person for this job. He has a lot of passion for health and safety, and he has both private sector experience, government experience, and working with government experience. And I want all of you guys to give him a great hand. He has a very challenging position, and he always rises up to the challenge and just delivers does a fabulous job. And I'm very proud to have him. I'm very proud to know this amazing person. Thank you very much.
I always find it tough to live up to these opening things. I am the CPO. Actually, I'm the third Chief Prevention Officer, so you can call me 3CPO. I refuse to use PowerPoints. I had a really bad experience with PowerPoints. You know, the dead air where you try to fix the technology is horrible. So I kind of like to talk and not leave anything behind, but I understand this is being filmed, so I'll tone things down.
It'll be edited, Ron.
Oh, okay. Okay. What goes on in Markham stays in Markham, shall we say? Okay. First off, thank you, Sobi. Thank you, Sharash, for the invitation, and thank you to 4S Consulting and the staff. This is really great when you get a group of people that are genuinely interested in health and safety in the same room. We often say to ourselves, you know, we have all the answers, but we have a tough time transferring that knowledge to people, and in some cases translating that knowledge so that people understand the importance of health and safety. We did a survey, well, actually a few surveys over the past year, and really the conclusion of the survey, certainly the conclusion I got, is that health and safety is becoming commoditized. And what I mean by that is most people are really interested in ensuring compliance, but compliance isn't necessarily health and safety. Remember, the Occupational Health and Safety Act is a minimum standard. And what we're finding is people say, okay, I need this course in case the inspector comes, I need to ensure this. But it's not really integrated into their system. It's not necessarily a health and safety management system. And in today's talk between my colleague Joanne and certainly the presentations by 4S, we'll talk about the importance of culture and importance of integrating your health and safety into your management systems. There's a lot of changes going on right now. I woke up Monday morning thinking it would be just another, well, my days never dull, but just another Monday morning at the office. And at 11:25, the Ministry of Labor became the Ministry of Labor Training and Skills Development. So we've created, in fact, a new ministry, which is a blending of the Ministry of Labor in its traditional form of prevention inspections, employment standards and policy and labor relations, and integrating that with the skills development and trades component of the Ministry of Training Colleges and University. So the new ministry over there will be just colleges and university, the skilled trades, and when the dissolution of the College of Trades takes place, all that will be moving back over to the Ministry of Labor. So we were a sleepy little ministry of about $320 million. Now we're a ministry of about $1.5 billion and 900 more people. So it's a lot of change that's taking place. So in addition to that change, the system partners, and when I say the system partners, I try to define what is health and safety in Ontario, and part of that is to try to help people understand that it's a complex system. It's not only the Ministry of Labor Prevention, it's not only the Ministry of Labor Inspections, but it's also the WSIB and it's all of its services and programs, everything from the health and safety component of WSIB, which my colleague Joanne is here representing, but also their claims management, return to work, the prevention system that includes both those funded through the Ministry of Labor as well as the private sector. But more importantly, it's employer associations, unions, employers, and individual employees. That is the system. And for so long, we've simply relied on the traditional system that you could see, whether it's the Ministry of Labor or WSIB, and that's kind of tough for us to do. We're not all that big. When you consider there's 500,000 businesses in Ontario, and there's about 400 inspectors on a good day, and there's the WSIB Health and Safety program that's there to support employers through training, the prevention side, the prevention system, we're not all that big. So collectively, we've got to start developing systems where it incentivizes and recognizes you, the employer, employer associations, and labor to get involved. And I think one of the stimulating things that's going to help us get there is rate framework. And you're going to get a very well-developed presentation by my colleagues on rate framework and what it means. And along with rate framework, we're trying to develop systems that incentivize and recognize people that really understand health and safety and are interested in inspiring from compliance to excellence in their system. And Joanne's going to talk about the Health and Safety Excellence Program, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about what is accreditation and recognition, but I'm also going to try and connect a few dots for you. And those that are involved in the construction industry will appreciate that. And the principle that, I have people that write speeches for me, and I never follow them, so bear with me. One of the principles that we're working on is the old adage that says, tides raise all boats. So if we can start encouraging systems to start getting engaged and moving everybody up within their sectors, in their industries, it's going to really help us move where we want to go a lot quicker. And a good example of that is those that are involved in construction. And about 10 years ago, it was 10 years ago, one of the things that the Tony Dean report, and Tony Dean was commissioned a study into health and safety after the Metron incident on Christmas Eve in 2009, where the swing stage collapsed and there was 4 fatalities. Coincidentally enough, the inquest into that situation is going to be held in the first couple of weeks in November, so 10 years from the time of the event. What happened, Tony Dean recommended that we should incentivize people that recognize and value and have implemented a health and safety management system. So while government was doing the to and fro and examining it and transferring responsibilities from an agency to the ministry as in prevention, the construction industry decided to move towards the Certificate of Recognition program, or the CORE program. And I'll talk a bit about CORE and how it relates to everything, but CORE essentially started out as an audit system, but has morphed into a health and safety management system. And people that jumped on board started to recognize that if you engage your employees, you take serious interest in health and safety, it will make a difference, an economic difference. Your employees will be working more productive, you have less lost time injuries, and so on and so forth. Then the buyers of construction started to look at that, and you had some big ones like City of Toronto, Metrolinx, Infrastructure Ontario. They started to look at, if I'm putting a bid out, I'm obviously conscious of quality and cost and all of the reputation of the people that I want to invite to my construction site. They started to add the safety record. They started to look at their supply chain and say, what kind of safety record do you have? And based on that, it's starting to push health and safety into the supply chain, where we start having a whole sector improve. I was at a Ontario General Contractors Awards ceremony, and the president of the OGCA, Clive Thurston, put up a graph, and the graph showed where construction is in general in terms of their injury rate, where ICI is, where residential construction is, and then it looked at members of the OGCA, of which the majority of them are CORE involved or actually CORE certified. And while it's just a small sample size, it showed that their injury rate and their when compared to others, was significantly lower. So it does give an indication, it's as I said, it's not a huge sample size, but it does give an indication that there is a relationship between your investment in health and safety and your performance. So we've been working with CORE because recently, over the last couple of years, one of the powers that I have the power to implement a health and safety accreditation and recognition program. So what we've done is we did some extensive consultations with labor and management associations, and we came up with a standard. And it's the standard of the Chief Prevention Officer, and it's if you have ISO 45001, if you have CSA 18001, or if you have a proprietary system, or if you have CORE as an example, or there's excellence in care in chemical. The concept of this is that those programs can be accredited. I would have the power to say that that program, that health and safety management system like ISO, you come to me and you show me that your whole entire shop has been ISO certified 45001, I will accredit that program. And what I'm doing is I'm accrediting the system that you are using. If you want to be recognized, then what we want to be able to do is you want to be able to demonstrate to me that you actually have implemented that binder. You have in place that health and safety management system. So if you have ISO, if you have 18001, it's one thing to say, I have the binder. It's another thing to have an independent third-party audit come in and say, I've audited this firm, and this firm is compliant with all of the standards of ISO 45001, or if it's CORE, or if it's anything else that I've recognized as an accredited standard, then you would be eligible for recognition. And what recognition gives you is it gives you both financial and non-financial recognition, and it's tied in to the rate framework. So you make an application for recognition, you show me that you've had a third-party audit, that you're in good standing. We will review you under OSHA, and if you're squeaky clean under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, you have no outstanding warrants or orders that that have not been dealt with, then we will work with WSIB and we will take a look at you under WSIA And under WISIA, if you are compliant, there's no history of claim suppression, or there is no outstanding issues, then you would be eligible for a financial reward. And that financial incentive is for a period of 3 years, and we have a formula, and that will, the reason that we've provided it for 3 years is under the new rate framework, if you're really good, after 3 years, there's no more need for an incentive because you're probably at the best rate you're going to be within your particular classification. So that was one thing over there. So this was a program that I started 18 months ago. I inherited in its form. And as we were discussing these incentives and recognition programs, we started working closer together with the WSIB as they were transforming their safety group program. And the safety group and work well program, they started to look at what's called the Health and Safety Excellence Program. And I wanted to make sure that if there was a similar program being developed in the system, how did it relate to accreditation and recognition? In fact, how did it relate to anybody out there that has either a proprietary health and safety management system they're trying to get, or are moving through, let's say, CORE as a certification system? They've registered, but they haven't started any programs. So in working with the WSIB, we kind of aligned what the 36 elements of the Health and Safety Excellence Program. All doors will open to a pathway to a conclusion, so that anybody's investment in health and safety, no matter how small, will amount to something and can, at the end of the day, you will receive something. I just want to talk for a minute about some of the things that are going on in the ministry. We are under review right now. We've been under review since the government came in. Their agenda is clearly to become more efficient, to be able to look at value for money, and if a dollar is spent, they want to see what the outcome is. And one of the challenges we have with health and safety is that we can measure a lot of outputs. I can tell you that we trained 650,000 people in working at heights, 25,000 people in joint health and safety, God knows how many thousands in WMIS, but what I can't tell you is what impact that had on the system. And one of the things the Auditor General is going to point out is that while Ontario is the safest jurisdiction in Canada, we've spent about $1 billion over the last 5 years in inspections and in health and safety and in prevention, but it's that correlation between that money invested and what are the outcomes that we're achieving from it. Are we getting better? And if we're getting better, why are we getting better? What are the reasons why we're getting better? And that's one of the areas that we really got to focus on. And we got to focus on, if we're going to invest money in health and safety, what kind of difference are we expecting? So what we'll be seeing is a lot more evidence-based research and outcomes measures for the system. And in working with WSIB, when we're in the process of implementing either the Health and Safety Excellence Program or the Recognition Program, we've been working on some very detailed metrics to be able to measure, if an employer has gone into this, what's the change after they've done 5 courses, 10 courses, or achieved excellence, or what's a comparison between a company that's been recognized and has a bona fide health and safety management system versus a company of a similar size. So we're going to be working on that. The WSIB is also under review, so we're waiting the outcomes of those as well. We're reviewing the whole process of occupational disease, both not only the legacy occupational disease management, which is, the challenge facing, people that were working in industries 30 and 40 years ago, where perhaps the science and PPE wasn't necessarily as rigorous as it is now, and you have the events like silicosis and mesothelioma, skin cancers, and other diseases caused by indolence that we're dealing with, and that's a very emotional situation. But we also have the other side of the coin is how do we prevent it happening 30 years from now? And we have an occupational disease action plan that we will be implementing with vigor in the next little while, and that whole plan will be to work with employers and employees and labor unions and so on to get the message out about what we need to do. My feeling is that I can't stop this. If I don't know how many people cut stone, I don't know how many people are trained. And if I don't know how many are trained, the incidence of silicosis is going to continue to skyrocket. So we really got to get those metrics in place and make sure that, when you're walking by, whether it's a landscaping job or a major stone refinishing job, or even getting your kitchen countertop, that people are cutting stone with the proper PPE and proper ventilation. Because at the current rate, silicosis is starting to show up in 35-year-olds, and it will not abate for probably the next 20 to 25 years unless we do something. And of course, we have the Metron inquest, which really hatched the current health and safety model in Ontario that will take place in 2 weeks. So all of these things are going to culminate, and through that, we're going to start to look at what are the systems, what are the integration opportunities we're going to have, how do we better use the resources that we have today, not only those that are funded through the system, but also the private sector, organizations like 4S Consulting. How do we engage them more in the system? Our goal really is to recognize the good actors, recognize those people that are doing really well, and help them influence their supply chain so, again, we can raise all boats. But the other side of the coin is we want to incentivize people to aspire to that level as well. So through the programs like Health and Safety Excellence, that's how we start getting people into the system. We will be focusing on our strategy over the next for the next 5 years. We've just held off a bit on the strategy release until these reviews are done, but we've done extensive surveying both on the strategy and other surveys. We did a survey of about 5,400 people, and just to give you a sort of example, it was a cross-section of healthcare, construction, manufacturing, retail. And we have enough metrics out of those to be able to make some pretty significant conclusions. One of the areas of concern was the fact that 76% of employers had a fairly, and employees, so it was a cross-section, but 76% of those surveyed said they had a strong to reasonably strong understanding of health and safety, but 24% said they didn't. And other things that came out, we looked particularly at millennials because they are the fastest, largest group that are being employed today. What is their learning style? Their learning style is they want to be talked to. It really demonstrates the importance of supervision and how supervision can influence outcomes. It also taught us that regular tool talks are important. Sometimes people say, no, I'll just put it on the bulletin board. No, actually getting a group of employees together for a short period of time and talking about them and listening to them has a huge impact and a huge outcome, positive outcome. We also know that about 17% of the population, working population, are extremely confident about their health and safety background. We know that 23% are reasonably confident, would like to be more confident in health and safety, And then we found that there's two cohorts in the mushy middle, about 46% of the population. Really, they'll take a health and safety course, but they don't think it was any good, or it was of no value. Or the most important thing to them is not necessarily their work, but it's getting home safely. So it's understanding that, in government, there's a tendency to create one format of training, but we're finding that there's 6 different ways of learning. We have people there's a small percentage of the labor market that have a keen understanding of health and safety, but feels that it's okay to either drink or smoke weed at work. So that's a challenge that we have to face as well. So we do have an opportunity to provide employers like yourselves with more information on what the perceptions of the labor market really is. We also know that both employees and employers by sector sometimes feel it's okay to disregard health and safety if you're behind. Let's throw all the stops out, let's get the job done. We've done other surveys that indicate that, Friday afternoons at 2 o'clock would probably be the best time to stop work and have a toolbox talk, and especially Friday afternoon before a long weekend. Because, a lot of people think that the most critical thing to look at in terms of impairment is, has he been drinking or has he been smoking weed? No. Is he thinking about, or she thinking about, something else other than concentrating on the job? Equally as significant an impairment. Or if they are anxious, or if they're having challenges at home, or if they happen to pop 2 cold medications before they come to work and they're working in a safety-sensitive job. So good employers have policies that we would encourage their employees, especially those in safety-sensitive jobs, to be able to come forward and say, I didn't sleep last night because my kid's sick and I'm fatigued and I've also got a cold, but I'm going to go to work anyway because I need to. And in some cases, that's what causes accidents. So when we look at impairments, let's look at it this wide and not simply narrow it down. So these surveys are going to help us quite significantly. As I mentioned, we are rolling out the strategy. The strategy will be based on collaboration, working as a system, engaging employers and employees. We will focus on the highest hazards that are out there. We will also be focusing on occupational diseases. One of the things that we are also doing is we want to start to move towards how do we increase one's accessibility to health and safety information. And this is a carryover from my previous job, but health and safety needs to be on demand and not scheduled. Because when it's scheduled, there's always things that get in the way. So we've probably heard we are moving towards a online version of the Joint Occupational Health and Safety Program Part 1. The Health and Safety Rep program for those employers that are less than 19 is already available online. It's only $25. Surprisingly, there's been very little uptake on that program. But considering that 83% of small business, 83% of businesses in Ontario are small business, we should see a bigger uptick if we're just worrying about compliance. But we are putting the Joint Health and Safety Part 1, that's the 3-day program. That standard will be posted for providers to take a look at in the next month. And we would expect that after it's completed, that will be available for within the system probably in the springtime. The last thing I want to mention, probably about to get the hook, is that one of the things in focusing the system, we want to look at those things that are of greatest issue. So we've looked at residential construction as an example. Still is one of the highest areas or sectors of both injuries, critical injuries and fatalities, as well as general trucking. General trucking is probably the worst. It is the worst of all the sectors in Ontario. So we're focusing on those 2 areas. We're doing very detailed risk assessments to be able to understand why things are happening. And the reason we're using risk assessments is we did that 4 years ago after there was 2 mining fatalities. We did a mining review, and we went in and did a detailed risk assessment. We got the employers and the employees and the unions in a room, and we said, you can't leave until you identify every risk in mining. And there were hundreds of them. And then we said, you can't leave until you identify the top 10. And then when they took the top 10, we looked at those top 10 and compared it against accident injuries that are occurring on an underground mining site. And we found out that 4 of them cause about 80 to 85% of the injuries and fatalities. So what we said to the mining sector, just focus on those. If you can do a risk assessment and understand what are the 4 or 5 things that are actually causing the majority of problems, you will make a big difference. And in actual fact, since we did the mining review, there has not been a fatality in underground mining in the past 3 years. So we're also looking at agriculture, young workers, mental health, first responders. PTSD is a real issue, violence in the workplace, violence and harassment. Number 1 reason why inspectors get called. When we did the survey of 5,400 people, what is the biggest thing that concerns you in your workplace? Violence and harassment. So learning that workplace culture is important. You have good workplace culture, you'll have good health and safety. You have good health and safety, you'll have great productivity. You have great productivity, you have great return. So those are all interconnected. And we're also looking at mining and forestry. And you know, one of the interesting things that we found out is that you know, sometimes we focus on the wrong things. You know, legislation, you put legislation in, and the legislation is supposed to make things all better. But it doesn't. I mean, you can't legislate someone, you can take the horse to water, but you can't make them drink. But one of the interesting things that we found in general trucking was there's a regulation that says if you drive for 13 hours, you got to stop the truck, pull over, and rest. So that's great. I feel safer already, that I know that that truck driving down the road, the guy's had 11 hours off, and he's refreshed. But we also found out when we started to do a detailed assessment that health problems within trucking is significant. And the prevalence of sleep apnea is very high. So while we have a regulation that says pull over and sleep, they're not sleeping because they have a physical impairment that is prohibiting them from getting well or from getting a good rest. So when we start connecting the dots and we start doing detailed risk assessments and we start looking at root cause analysis, some of the obvious is, what we thought was obvious is no longer obvious. We have to start focusing on where the problem is and not and where it isn't. So there will be a lot of changes that are going to take place. Stay tuned. I have a meeting at 10 o'clock on our new ministry that's coming up. But it's always a pleasure to work with 4S and their audience and their team. So hopefully they'll have more like this and we'll have an opportunity to talk further. So enjoy the rest of your conference. Thank you.